Hello, hello. Thank you for joining me. This is day 4 vocal readings from book 16, Sebastian Junger's Tribe. In the case that you'd like to see additional details about the book, I've included a link in the notes. The focus points of this section of the book include the contrast between the influence of a communal society on the recovery process from PTSD symptoms versus the influence of an isolation-inducing society on that recovery, the negative effects of the victim mentality on recovery from PTSD, and generally speaking, adjustment into civilian life, and the broad socio-behavioral disconnect between military and civilians. There are still enormous numbers of people who had utterly ordinary wartime experiences and yet feel dangerously alienated back home. Clinically speaking, such alienation is not the same as PTSD and maybe deserves its own diagnostic term, but both result from military service abroad, so it's understandable that vets and clinicians alike are prone to conflating them. Either way, it makes one wonder exactly what it is about modern society that is so mortally dispiriting to come home to. In humans, lack of social support has been found to be twice as reliable at predicting PTSD as the severity of the trauma itself. In other words, you could be mildly traumatized, on par with, say, an ordinary rear-based deployment to Afghanistan, and experience long-term PTSD simply because of a lack of social support back home. Because modern society has almost completely eliminated trauma and violence from everyday life, anyone who does suffer those things is deemed to be extraordinarily unfortunate. This gives people access to sympathy and resources, but also creates an identity of victimhood that can delay recovery. Unfortunately, for the past decade, American soldiers have returned to a country that displays many indicators of low social resilience. Resources are not shared equally, a quarter of children live in poverty, jobs are hard to get, and minimum wage is almost impossible to live on. Instead of being able to work and contribute to society, a highly therapeutic thing to do, a large percentage of veterans are just offered lifelong disability payments. The following passages are a fantastic summary of the recognition that can be packaged from this book. There's no use arguing that modern society isn't a kind of paradise. The vast majority of us don't personally have to grow or kill our own food, build our own dwellings, or defend ourselves from wild animals and enemies. In one day, we can travel 1,000 miles by pushing our foot down on a gas pedal, or around the world by booking a seat on an airplane. When we are in pain, we have narcotics that dole it out of existence. And when we are depressed, we have pills that change the chemistry of our brains. We understand an enormous amount about the universe, from subatomic particles to our own bodies, to galaxy clusters, and we use that knowledge to make life even better and easier for ourselves. The poorest people in modern society enjoy a level of physical comfort that was unimaginable 1,000 years ago. And the wealthiest people literally live the way gods were imagined to have. And yet, there are many costs to modern society, starting with its toll on the global ecosystem and working one's way down to its toll on the human psyche. But the most dangerous loss may be to community. If the human race is under threat in some way that we don't yet understand, it will probably be at a community level that we either solve the problem or fail to. Soldiers experience this tribal way of thinking at war, but when they come home, they realize that the tribe they were actually fighting for wasn't their country, it was their unit. It makes absolutely no sense to make sacrifices for a group that itself isn't willing to make sacrifices for you. That is the position American soldiers have been in for the past decade and a half. The public is often accused of being disconnected from its military, but frankly, it's disconnected from just about everything: farming, mineral extraction, gas and oil production, bulk cargo transport, logging, fishing, infrastructure construction. All the industries that keep the nation going are mostly unacknowledged by the people who depend on them most. It may be worth considering whether middle-class American life, for all its material good fortune, has lost some essential sense of unity that might otherwise discourage alienated men from turning apocalyptically violent. One way to determine what is missing in day-to-day American life may be to examine what behaviors spontaneously arise when that life is disrupted. Thank you for joining me in my studies today. We definitely covered some sobering topics. I am incredibly intrigued not only by the process of expansion of consciousness, but also equally by how to apply an expansion of consciousness to day-to-day decision making in the human condition. I appreciate you sharing in that process with me. It's lovely to have individuals who share curriculum with me, and I look forward to sharing more tomorrow.